Every time I think of her, she gasps, no matter where she is in the universe. Now she's in my mind constantly, and I'm falling in love with someone who hears my every thought. Daniel had always been the practical type. He worked with numbers all day, analyzing data for a tech company in Seattle. His life was predictable, organized, and honestly a bit boring. He liked it that way. No surprises, no drama, just a steady routine that made sense. That Tuesday evening changed everything. He decided to take his usual walk through the nature reserve after work. The fog was rolling in thick that day, making the trees look like shadows. Daniel didn't mind. He actually enjoyed these quiet walks where he could clear his head after staring at computer screens for 8 hours straight. He was about halfway through the trail when he saw the lights. At first he thought maybe someone was flying drones. The lights moved in patterns that seemed too organized to be random, but too smooth to be anything mechanical. They danced between the trees like living things, glowing soft blue and green. Daniel stopped walking. His brain immediately started looking for logical explanations. Weather phenomenon? Reflection from the highway. But the highway was miles away and the lights were moving with purpose. Then he saw her standing there. She wasn't human. That much was obvious right away. But she wasn't scary either, which surprised him. She looked almost human, just different. Her skin had this faint glow to it, like she was lit from within. Her eyes were bigger than they should be, and they were this incredible shade of blue-green, like looking into deep ocean water. Daniel's mind went completely blank for a second, then exploded with questions. What was she? Where did she come from? Was this really happening? Was he losing his mind? And that's when she gasped. It wasn't a small gasp either. It was loud and sharp, like someone had just startled her badly. Her hand flew up to her chest and she took a step backward. Daniel froze. He hadn't said anything. He hadn't moved toward her. All he'd done was think those questions. Then it hit him. She could hear his thoughts. To test it, he thought very clearly, "Can you understand me?" Another gasp. This time she actually stumbled a bit, like his thought had physically pushed her. Her eyes went wide and she looked at him with this mixture of shock and something else he couldn't quite identify. Daniel tried to control his thoughts. But that's impossible, right? The moment you try not to think about something, that's all you can think about. His mind raced with more questions, and with each one she reacted. Sometimes she'd flinch. Sometimes she'd gasp again. Once she actually put both hands over her face like she was overwhelmed. He felt terrible. Whatever was happening, he was clearly causing her distress. He tried to think calming thoughts, but even those seemed to affect her. She lowered her hands and looked at him with such intensity that he felt it in his chest. They stood there for what felt like forever, but was probably only 5 minutes. The fog swirled around them and the forest was completely silent except for their breathing and her occasional gasps. Daniel noticed that she was studying him just as carefully as he was studying her. Finally, she raised one hand. It was clearly a gesture of peace, something universal enough that he understood it immediately. Then without warning, she simply vanished. Not walked away, not ran off. She disappeared like she'd never been there at all. Daniel stood alone on the trail, his heart pounding. He looked around, half expecting to see her hiding behind a tree. But she was gone. The lights were gone. Everything was back to normal, foggy forest. He walked home in a daze. His mind kept replaying the encounter over and over. Every detail felt important. The way she'd looked at him, those gasps, the certainty that she'd heard every single thought in his head. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about her. What was she doing right now? Was she on a spaceship somewhere? Was she thinking about him too? Did aliens even think the way humans did? And then he felt something strange. It was like a ripple in the air, a sense of presence that he couldn't explain. Somehow he knew she'd just reacted to his thoughts, even though she wasn't there. Even though he couldn't see her, he could feel her gasp echoing somewhere across whatever distance separated them. It should have been impossible. It should have scared him. But instead, Daniel felt fascinated. He'd just made contact with something beyond human understanding, and somehow they were still connected. He spent the next few days trying to go back to normal life. He went to work, sat in meetings, responded to emails, but his mind kept wandering back to that forest, to those glowing eyes, to the sound of her gasp. And every time he thought about her intensely, he'd feel that strange ripple, that sense that she was somewhere reacting to his thoughts. His co-workers started noticing he was distracted. His friend Kevin asked him if everything was okay. Daniel almost laughed. How could he explain that he couldn't stop thinking about an alien he'd met in the woods? That sounded crazy. He was starting to wonder if maybe he was crazy. But then Friday night arrived, exactly 1 week after the first encounter. Daniel was at home making dinner, trying to focus on chopping vegetables and not on glowing skin and telepathic connections. He was failing miserably at both. The lights in his apartment flickered. Daniel looked up from his cutting board just in time to see her materialize in his living room. No door opening, no windows, no explanation. She was just suddenly there, standing next to his bookshelf, looking around his apartment with obvious curiosity. They stared at each other. Daniel's knife hung in midair, forgotten. His thoughts were screaming, but he couldn't form actual words, mental or otherwise. She moved first, taking a small step toward him. Then she did something that surprised him even more than her sudden appearance. She spoke, but not with her mouth. Her voice appeared directly in his head, clear as if she was standing right next to him, whispering in his ear. "You haven't stopped," she said, and her mental voice carried emotions he couldn't quite name. "Every day, every hour, you think of me. Why?" Daniel set down the knife carefully. His hand was shaking. He tried to speak out loud, but his voice came out rough. "I don't know. I can't help it. You're the most incredible thing that's ever happened to me." She gasped again, but this time it was softer, almost like she'd expected his answer, but it still affected her. She moved closer, and Daniel could see that glow on her skin more clearly now. It pulsed gently like a heartbeat made of light. "In my world," she said in his mind, "when someone thinks of another constantly, it means something. Something significant. But you're human. You don't know what you're doing to me." "What am I doing?" Daniel asked, his heart racing. She looked away, and for the first time she seemed vulnerable. "Every thought you have of me, I feel it. Like you're calling my name across the universe. It's beautiful. It's overwhelming. It's making it very difficult for me to do my work." "Your work?" "Observing your species. I'm a researcher. I'm supposed to be studying humans from a distance, documenting behavior, learning about your world. But then you saw me and you thought about me, and somehow our minds connected in a way that should be impossible." Daniel took a careful step toward her. "So every time I think about you, I gasp, I react. I feel your presence in my consciousness, like you're standing right beside me, no matter where I actually am." She finally looked back at him, and those ocean blue eyes held his gaze. "I've never experienced anything like it. None of my people have, not in thousands of years." They stood in his small apartment, human and alien. Connected by an accident neither of them understood. Daniel's dinner sat forgotten on the counter. Outside, the city hummed with its normal Friday night energy, completely unaware that something impossible was happening just blocks away. "I don't know how to stop thinking about you," Daniel admitted quietly. "Should I? Is it hurting you?" She was quiet for a long moment. When she finally responded, her mental voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know. I should say yes. I should tell you to forget me, to break this connection somehow. But," another soft gasp, "but I find myself listening for your thoughts now. When you sleep and your mind quiets, I feel lonely." Daniel's apartment suddenly felt too small for the magnitude of what was happening. He'd gone from a boring, predictable life to being telepathically linked with an alien researcher in the span of 1 week. It was absurd. It was impossible. It was the most real thing he'd ever experienced. "What happens now?" he asked. She moved to his window, looking out at the city lights. "I don't know. This has never happened before. There are no rules for this, no protocols. I should report it to my superiors, but..." She trailed off. But then they'll want to study you, study us. And this thing between us, whatever it is, it won't be ours anymore. It'll belong to science, to governments, to people who want to understand it instead of just experiencing it." Daniel joined her at the window. He was careful not to stand too close, unsure what physical proximity might do to their already intense mental connection. "Can I ask you something?" "You're going to think it anyway," she said, and he could sense something like amusement in her mental voice. "I might as well hear it clearly. Do you have a name? Something I can call you?" She turned to face him, and her glow seemed to pulse a bit brighter. "My name in my language would be impossible for you to pronounce." "But..." The next few weeks were the strangest of Daniel's life, and considering he was telepathically linked to an alien, that was saying something. Zara started visiting more regularly, though she was careful about timing. She'd appear in his apartment late at night or early morning, times when he was alone and they could talk without raising suspicion. Talking, Daniel learned, was complicated when one person could read the other's thoughts. He'd start to say something out loud and Zara would respond before he finished because she'd already heard him think it. At first it was frustrating. Then it became almost funny. Eventually it just became their normal. But the constant connection was wearing on both of them. Daniel couldn't focus at work. He'd be in the middle of analyzing a spreadsheet and his mind would drift to Zara. Where was she? What was she doing? Was she observing other humans or was she thinking about him too? And every time his thoughts turned to her, he'd feel that ripple, that sense of her gasping somewhere far away. It became a feedback loop. He'd think of her, she'd react, he'd feel her reaction, which made him think of her more intensely, which caused a stronger reaction. Round and round it went, getting more intense each time. One evening, about 3 weeks after that first night in his apartment, Zara appeared looking exhausted. Her glow was dimmer than usual, and she seemed to struggle to maintain her physical form. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked, immediately concerned. She materialized on his couch, something she'd never done before. Usually she stood, maintaining a certain formality, but now she looked like she needed to sit down. "Your thoughts are getting stronger. Or I'm getting more sensitive to them. I'm not sure which. But Daniel, I can barely function. When you're awake and thinking about me, which seems to be most of the time, I can feel it constantly. It's like someone calling my name every few seconds." Guilt crashed over Daniel. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to." "I know you don't," Zara interrupted. Her mental voice was gentle despite her obvious fatigue. "That's what makes this so complicated. You're not trying to overwhelm me. This is just how your mind works now. I'm in there, part of your thought patterns, and the more you try not to think about me, the more you think about me." Daniel sat down across from her, careful to keep some distance. "What can I do?" "There has to be something. My people have techniques for mental shielding," Zara explained, "but they're designed for our biology, our neural patterns. I don't know if they'll work on a human brain. We're not even supposed to have telepathic connections with other species. You're the first human I've ever heard of who developed this ability." "Lucky me," Daniel said with a weak smile. "Lucky us," Zara corrected, and despite everything, he felt warmth in her mental tone. "If this had to happen to anyone, I'm glad it was someone like you." They spent that evening working on mental exercises. Zara tried to teach Daniel how to create barriers around his thoughts, how to quiet his mind, how to direct his mental energy away from their connection. It was harder than anything he'd ever attempted. Thoughts weren't like actions you could just control. They bubbled up constantly, random and unstoppable. But slowly, over hours of practice, Daniel started to get better at it. He learned to recognize when his thoughts were drifting toward Zara and gently redirect them. It wasn't perfect, he still thought about her constantly, but the thoughts became less intense, less demanding of her attention. "Better," Zara said, and her glow was already getting brighter. "That's much better. I can still feel you, but it's not overwhelming anymore. It's more like background music instead of a loud alarm." Daniel felt oddly proud of himself. "So I'm background music in your head now?" "Very persistent background music," Zara replied, and he could sense amusement again. "But yes, it's actually unpleasant." As the days turned into weeks, they settled into a new rhythm. Daniel learned to manage his thoughts better, and Zara learned to filter his mental presence without blocking him entirely. They spent their evenings together, sometimes talking, sometimes just existing in the same space, while Zara observed the human world through his eyes and thoughts. Daniel learned things about her too. She was part of a research team studying Earth, specifically looking at human emotional responses and social bonds. Her people had evolved beyond purely physical existence millions of years ago, choosing to exist primarily as consciousness, with the ability to take physical form when needed. They were explorers and scholars, traveling the universe to document and understand other forms of life. "We're supposed to observe without interfering," Zara explained one night while they sat on Daniel's balcony watching the city lights. "That's our most important rule. We can watch, we can study, but we never make direct contact. We never let ourselves be seen." "But I saw you," Daniel pointed out. You shouldn't have been able to, Zara said, her mental voice thoughtful. I had my perception filter active. To everyone else in that forest, I was invisible. But somehow you looked right at me. Your mind reached out before I could stop it, and mine reached back. It was instinctive for both of us. Do you regret it? Zara was quiet for a long moment. Daniel tried to keep his thoughts neutral, not wanting to influence her answer. Finally, she responded, I should. By all the rules of my people, I should regret breaking protocol, creating an unauthorized connection, getting personally involved with a research subject. But I don't, is that wrong? I don't think wanting connection is ever wrong, Daniel said. We're social creatures, humans. We need connection to survive. Maybe your people are more like us than you think. My people would say they've evolved past the need for personal bonds, Zara replied. We have collective consciousness, shared knowledge, unity of purpose. Individual attachments are considered primitive. That sounds lonely. It is, Zara admitted, and Daniel felt a wave of sadness through their connection that made his chest ache. I've been lonely for a very long time. We all are, though most of us won't admit it. We sacrificed individual connection for collective understanding. It made us powerful, but it made us isolated in ways we don't like to acknowledge. Daniel wanted to reach out and take her hand, but he wasn't sure if physical touch was something her people did. Is that why you reached back when my mind reached out? Because you were lonely? Probably, Zara said softly. I've been observing humans for 2 years, watching you form bonds, watching you care for each other, watching you build lives around connection. And I was so envious. Then you looked at me with such wonder, such curiosity, such openness, and I couldn't help myself. I'm glad you didn't, Daniel said. She turned to look at him, her ocean blue eyes reflecting the city lights. Even though I gasp every time you think of me? Even though I invaded your mind and changed your life completely? Especially because of all that, Daniel replied. My life before was so boring, Zara. I went through the motions, did my job, went home, repeated. Nothing meant anything, but now I'm connected to someone from another world. Now my thoughts matter. Now I matter. Zara gasped, but this time it was different, softer, almost like a sigh. You always mattered, Daniel. But I understand what you mean. You've given me something I didn't know I needed. Purpose beyond research, connection beyond collective consciousness. They sat together as the night deepened, human and alien, bound by an accidental telepathy that was becoming less accidental every day. Daniel's neighbors probably would have been shocked to know that the glowing figure on the balcony wasn't human. But to Daniel, she was becoming more real than anyone else in his life. What happens when your research is done? Daniel asked, the question that had been haunting him for weeks finally surfacing. Do you leave? Do we never see each other again? I don't know, Zara answered honestly. My team is scheduled to depart in about 4 months. We'll move on to another system, another planet. I'm supposed to go with them. Supposed to? I'm considering requesting an extension to continue studying human connection. She paused, and he could feel her hesitation. That's not entirely honest. I want to stay to be near you, but I can't admit that officially. It would be too personal, too emotional. Not scientific enough. Daniel felt his heart rate pick up, and he knew Zara could sense it through their connection. Would they let you stay if you asked? Maybe. Extensions are rare but not unheard of. I'd need a compelling research justification. And I'd need to not mention the telepathic connection, because if they knew about that, she trailed off. They'd want to study me, Daniel finished. They'd want to study both of us, separate us, figure out exactly how it happened so they could prevent it from happening again. They'd see it as a contamination of research, a violation of protocol. They wouldn't understand that some connections can't be explained scientifically. Some things just are. Daniel watched her glow pulse in the darkness, his mind full of thoughts he wasn't trying to shield anymore. Thoughts about how much he'd grown to need their evening talks. How much he looked forward to that ripple feeling when she sensed his thoughts. How empty his life would feel if she left. And with each thought, Zara gasped softly, not from being overwhelmed, but from feeling the depth of what he was expressing without words. The connection between them hummed like a living thing, growing stronger, not weaker, more intentional, not less. They both knew they were approaching a decision point. Month 3 of knowing Zara brought new complications Daniel hadn't anticipated. The telepathic connection wasn't just maintaining itself anymore, it was growing. What started as Zara hearing his surface thoughts had evolved into something deeper. Now she could sense his emotions, his memories, even dreams he'd had years ago if he happened to recall them. And it wasn't one-sided anymore. Daniel was starting to feel Zara, too. Not as clearly as she felt him. Her mind was structured differently, alien in ways he couldn't fully grasp. But he could sense her emotions now. When she was near, he could tell if she was happy, sad, anxious, or excited without her saying a word, mental or otherwise. It was both wonderful and terrifying. "This isn't normal," Zara said one evening as they walked through a mostly empty park. She'd gotten better at maintaining her physical form for longer periods, and she was learning to project an appearance that looked human enough to not attract attention in public. Daniel had suggested they needed to get out of his apartment sometimes, experience the world together instead of just observing it through windows. "Nothing about us is normal," Daniel replied, watching a jogger pass by without giving them a second glance. "That ship sailed the moment we connected in that forest." "No, I mean this specifically isn't normal even for telepathic bonds," Zara insisted. Her mental voice carried worry. "I've been researching our people's historical records. The old connections from before we evolved. They were intense, yes, but they had limits. What's happening with us is..." She struggled to find words. "It's like we're building a bridge between our minds that gets stronger every day instead of stabilizing." Daniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "Is that dangerous?" "I don't know. Maybe. The records don't go into detail about what happened to the pairs who bonded this way. Just that they were studied and then..." Zara went quiet. "And then what?" "The records stop mentioning them. They just disappear from history." They walked in silence for a while, both processing that disturbing information. A family passed them going the opposite direction. Kids laughing about something, parents looking tired but happy. Normal human life continuing all around them, completely unaware of the impossible situation unfolding in their midst. "We need to tell someone," Daniel finally said. "Your people, maybe some human scientist who can be trusted. We can't figure this out alone." "If I tell my people, they'll order me home immediately," Zara said. "They'll classify you as a threat, Daniel. Not because you are one, but because you represent an unknown. A human who developed telepathic abilities through contact with us. They'll want to contain that knowledge." "What does contain mean?" Zara's glow dimmed slightly. "At minimum, they'd monitor you for the rest of your life. At maximum..." She didn't finish the sentence, but Daniel felt her fear through their connection and understood. At maximum, they might decide the safest option was to make sure he never told anyone what happened. "So we keep it secret," Daniel said, trying to sound braver than he felt. "We figure it out ourselves." "Daniel, we might not be able to," Zara said, stopping to face him. They were in a darker part of the park now, away from the main paths. Her human disguise flickered for a moment, revealing her true glowing form underneath. "This connection is changing both of us. You're developing abilities humans aren't supposed to have. I'm feeling emotions my people supposedly evolved past. We're becoming something neither human nor my species. Something new, is that bad?" "I don't know." Zara's frustration echoed through both their minds. "Everything I was taught says yes, this is bad, this is dangerous, this is wrong. But everything I feel says this is the most right thing that's ever happened to me, and I don't know which voice to trust anymore." Daniel wanted to comfort her, but he wasn't sure how. Their connection was so intense now that his feelings would flood into her, whether he wanted them to or not. "What do you feel right now?" he asked instead. "When you're with me, what do you actually feel?" Zara was quiet, and Daniel could sense her searching for the right words. When she finally responded, her mental voice was barely a whisper. "Complete. I feel complete. Like there was a part of me missing my entire existence and I never knew it until I found it in your mind. When I'm with you, when I feel your thoughts and emotions, when you start to feel mine back, I feel more real than I ever have. Like I finally understand what my people gave up when we chose collective consciousness over individual bonds." Daniel's heart was pounding. "That's how I feel too. Like my whole life before was just waiting. Waiting for someone to really see me, really know me. You know everything about me now, Zara. Every stupid thought, every random worry, every hope I've never told anyone. And you're still here. Why wouldn't I be?" "Because people leave," Daniel said, old wounds surfacing that Zara immediately sensed through their connection. "When they really get to know you, all your flaws and problems and boring parts, they leave. But you can't even escape my thoughts, and you're still choosing to come back every day." Zara stepped closer to him. Her glow brightened in the darkness, casting soft light on both of them. "Daniel, I don't want to escape your thoughts. Yes, sometimes they're overwhelming. Yes, sometimes you think about work spreadsheets or what to have for dinner or that embarrassing thing you said in 8th grade. But all of it is you, and all of you is fascinating to me. Daniel laughed despite himself. You find my thoughts about spreadsheets fascinating? I find the way your mind works fascinating, Zara corrected. The connections you make, the way you problem solve, the random tangents your thoughts take. Human consciousness is so different from mine. Your chaos and creativity and emotion all swirled together. My people are so ordered, so logical. Being in your mind is like experiencing color for the first time when you've only ever seen in black and white. You're going to make me blush, Daniel said. I know. I can feel it already happening, Zara replied, and there was definitely amusement in her mental voice now. Your embarrassment tastes like warmth and sweetness. It's nice. Emotions have taste to you? Not tastes exactly, but textures, temperatures, colors. It's hard to explain. Your happiness is bright yellow and warm. Your worry is cold blue. Your affection is... She paused, and Daniel felt a wave of something complex from her. Your affection is deep red and hot, and it makes me gasp every single time I feel it. They were standing very close now, close enough that Daniel could feel the warmth radiating from her glowing form. He thought about how much he'd grown to care for her over these months, how essential she'd become to his daily life, how the thought of her leaving in a month made his chest physically ache, and Zara gasped loud and sudden in the quiet park. Her glow pulsed brighter, and she actually stumbled backward a step. Sorry, Daniel said automatically. Was that too much? No, Zara said, her mental voice shaking. No, it was perfect. It was just strong. What you're feeling right now, it's incredibly strong. I wasn't prepared. What am I feeling? Daniel asked, genuinely curious. He knew he cared about her, but he'd been trying not to examine those feelings too closely. Trying not to put a name to them because naming them made them real. And real feelings for an alien who would leave in a month seemed like a recipe for heartbreak. You really don't know? Zara asked, studying his face. I'm trying not to think about it, Daniel admitted. Well, I can't not think about it because it's broadcasting from your mind like a beacon, Zara said. Daniel, what you're feeling, what you've been feeling for weeks now but trying to ignore, it's... She struggled with the concept. In human terms, I think you'd call it love. You're in love with me. The word hung between them in the darkness. Daniel wanted to deny it, to laugh it off, to make a joke about how could anyone fall in love with someone who lived in their head. But the moment Zara said it, he knew it was true. He'd been avoiding the realization, but she was right there in his mind, feeling everything, and lying was pointless. Yeah, he finally said, his voice rough. I guess I am. Is that bad? Zara was very still. Her glow had stabilized, but Daniel could feel complex emotions swirling through their connection. Confusion, joy, fear, wonder, all tangled together in a way that made his head spin. My people don't fall in love, Zara said slowly. We bond intellectually, we share consciousness, we work together toward common goals. But love, the way humans experience it, the way you're experiencing it right now, we're not supposed to feel that anymore. But, Daniel prompted because he could sense there was more. But I think I'm feeling it anyway, Zara whispered. When you think of me, when I sense your presence in my consciousness, when we're together like this, I feel something I don't have words for in my language. Something warm and bright and terrifying. Something that makes me want to stay on this planet, in this city, near you forever. Even though I know I'm supposed to leave. Even though I know this violates every rule my people have. Daniel reached out slowly, giving her time to move away if she wanted. When she didn't, he took her glowing hands in his human ones. The touch sent sparks through their connection, amplifying everything they were both feeling. What do we do? He asked. I don't know, Zara admitted. My ship leaves in 1 month. I have to make a decision. Request to stay and risk my people finding out about our connection. 3 weeks. That's all the time they had left before Zara's ship was scheduled to leave Earth's orbit. 3 weeks to figure out if there was any possible way to make this work. 3 weeks before Daniel would have to say goodbye to the most important person in his life, human or otherwise. The problem was, Zara still hadn't made her official request to stay. Every day she said she would. Every day something stopped her. Fear, duty, uncertainty about what her people would say. Daniel tried to be patient, tried to understand that this was a massive decision for her. But he could feel his anxiety growing through their connection. which made her anxious, which made him more anxious. The feedback loop was getting intense. "I need to tell you something," Zara said one evening. She'd appeared in his apartment earlier than usual, and Daniel could immediately sense that something was wrong. Her glow was flickering, unstable, and her mental voice carried a weight he'd never felt before. Daniel set down the book he'd been pretending to read. "What's wrong?" "I got a message from my research commander today. They're conducting routine checks on all team members before departure. Psychological evaluations, memory scans, the standard protocols." Zara moved to the window, looking out at the city but clearly not seeing it. "They'll know, Daniel. The moment they scan my memories, they'll see everything. You, our connection, all of it." Daniel's stomach dropped. "When?" "In 10 days. I'm scheduled for day after tomorrow, but I managed to delay it by claiming I was in the middle of critical observations. But I can only push it back so far without raising suspicion. So we have 10 days to figure this out." "We have 10 days before everything changes," Zara corrected. "Once they know, I'll be recalled immediately. They'll want to study both of us, question us, figure out how this happened so they can make sure it never happens again." Daniel stood up and crossed to her. He'd gotten comfortable with touching her now, though it still sent little electric thrills through their connection. He put his hand on her shoulder and she leaned into the touch. "Then you request the extension now, tonight, before they can scan your memories. Request to stay on Earth for continued research. They'll want to know what research justifies an extension, what could possibly be important enough to delay our departure schedule. Tell them you've discovered something unprecedented about human consciousness, about how humans form bonds, about the depth of human emotional capacity. Tell them anything. Just make it sound scientific enough that they'll approve it." Zara turned to face him, her ocean blue eyes full of conflict. "Daniel, that would be lying. My people value truth above everything. Deception is considered one of the worst violations of our code. But staying silent about our connection, that's not deception. That's omission. It's different. Barely, but different." She pulled away from him, her distress making her glow pulse erratically. "You don't understand what you're asking. If I lie to my superiors and they discover it later, I won't just be recalled. I'll be exiled, cut off from my people permanently. I'll never be able to go home. Would that be so terrible?" Daniel asked, and immediately regretted it when he felt the spike of pain through their connection. "This isn't my home, Daniel. I've adapted, I've learned to exist here, but Earth isn't where I belong. My people, my culture, my entire history is out there among the stars. Asking me to give that up permanently, I'm not asking you to give it up. I'm asking you to choose it later instead of now. Buy us time to figure out a real solution." Zara was quiet for a long time. Daniel could feel her thoughts churning, examining the situation from every angle. She was brilliant, his alien researcher, capable of processing probabilities and outcomes faster than any human. But this wasn't a logic problem. This was about heart versus duty, love versus loyalty, and those were calculations no amount of intelligence could solve. "There might be another option," Zara finally said, her mental voice hesitant. "It's risky. More than risky, actually. It's dangerous. Tell me. I've been researching the old records more thoroughly, the pairs who formed these connections in my people's past. I told you the records stopped mentioning them, and I thought that meant they'd been hidden away or worse. But I found something deeper in the archives, in sections that required high-level clearance to access." Daniel waited, sensing she needed to tell this at her own pace. They didn't disappear because they were contained. They disappeared because they left. The bonded pairs, once their connections became strong enough, they simply vanished. No ships, no technology, just gone. And the records suggest they went to a place between spaces, a dimension that exists at the intersection of minds, a place where consciousness itself is reality. "That sounds like mythology," Daniel said carefully. "That's what my people thought too. But there were too many documented cases for it to be just stories. Hundreds of pairs over thousands of years, all reporting the same phenomena. As their telepathic bonds deepened, they started perceiving another layer of reality. A space where their combined consciousness could exist without physical limitations." Daniel tried to wrap his head around the concept. "So what, we just think ourselves into another dimension?" "It's not that simple. The transition requires the bond to be at maximum depth. We'd have to merge our consciousness more completely than we already have. Share not just thoughts and emotions, but memories, identity, everything that makes us who we are. We'd essentially become one being existing in two forms." That sounds terrifying. It is terrifying, Zara agreed. Because once you merge like that, you can't fully separate again. Even if we returned to physical reality, we'd always be intertwined. No privacy, no independence, just constant unity. And there's no guarantee we'd be able to return. Those pairs who left, none of them ever came back. Daniel sat down heavily on his couch. This was beyond anything he'd imagined. He'd been thinking maybe Zara could stay on Earth. Maybe they could do long-distance telepathy when she had to leave. Maybe somehow they'd find a way to maintain their connection across the normal limitations of space. But this was talking about leaving reality itself behind. You think that's what we should do? He asked. I don't know what we should do, Zara admitted, sitting beside him. I'm presenting options. Option 1. I request an extension based on false research claims. Bias maybe 6 more months before I'm inevitably recalled. Option 2. I go with my ship in 3 weeks and we maintain this connection across light years, not knowing if it will even work at such distances. Option 3. We attempt the merge and possibly transcend physical reality entirely, or possibly just destroy our minds trying. Those are all terrible options, yes, they are. Zara took his hand, her glow soft and warm in the dim apartment. I wish I could offer you something better. A happy ending where I just stay and we live a normal life together. But I can't. The universe doesn't work that way. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. Through their connection, he could feel her genuine anguish at having to present these choices. She wanted to stay. She wanted him. But she was also realistic about the obstacles they faced, and he loved her more for not sugarcoating their situation. We have 10 days, Daniel said. Let's use them. Research the merge thing more. See if there's any documentation about how it actually works. Maybe talk to some human scientists who could help without exposing you to your people. And if none of that works, if we're out of options... He paused, not sure he could say it. If we're out of options? Zara prompted gently. Then you request the extension and buy us more time, even if it means lying, even if it risks exile. Because Zara, I need you to understand something. Daniel turned to face her fully, making sure she could feel every bit of what he was about to say through their connection. I would rather have you here exiled from your people but with me than not have you at all. And I know that's selfish. I know that's asking you to give up everything. But that's how much you mean to me. Zara gasped, and it wasn't from surprise this time. It was from the sheer intensity of emotion flooding through their bond. Daniel's love, his need, his willingness to accept her even if she could never go home again. It was overwhelming and beautiful, and it made her glow so bright the entire apartment was illuminated. You would accept me, even if I could never return to my people? Even if being with you meant permanent exile? Zara, I would accept you if you were exiled, if you lost your abilities, if you became completely human. I would accept you in any form, in any circumstance. Because it's not your alien nature I fell in love with. It's you, your curiosity, your kindness. The way you listen to my boring thoughts like they're the most fascinating things in the universe. That's what I love. She was fully crying now, though her tears looked different than human tears, drops of pure light that fell from her eyes and dissolved before hitting the ground. My people don't cry. We evolved past the need for emotional release, but I'm crying because of you. You're making me more human, Daniel. More individual. More myself than I've ever been. Is that bad? It's the most wonderful, terrifying thing that's ever happened to me. Zara leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture of trust and affection she'd learned from watching humans. I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you. I'll figure something out, I promise. They sat together as the night deepened outside. The next week was a blur of research, planning, and increasingly desperate brainstorming. Daniel took vacation days from work, claiming a family emergency. Technically, it wasn't a lie. This was his family now, even if his family happened to be an alien researcher facing exile from her people. Zara spent her days pulling every piece of information she could find about consciousness merging, historical bonded pairs, and the dimensional spaces they'd allegedly accessed. The more she learned, the more real it seemed, and the more terrifying. There's a pattern, she explained to Daniel on day 4. They were sitting cross-legged on his living room floor, surrounded by floating holographic displays that only Zara could manifest. Daniel couldn't read the alien text, but he watched the symbols shift and reorganize as Zara worked through the data. Every pair that successfully transitioned reported the same sequence of events. First, their telepathic connection deepened to the point where they could share complete memories. Second, they began perceiving reality differently, seeing the spaces between atoms, the energy that underlies matter. Third, they started existing partially in both places, physical reality and this other space, before finally making the full transition. "Where are we in that sequence?" Daniel asked. "We're between stage 1 and 2. We share thoughts and emotions easily now. I can access your recent memories if you let me. But we haven't started perceiving the deeper reality yet. That requires a level of consciousness merging we haven't achieved." "How do we achieve it?" Zara was quiet for a moment. "Complete vulnerability. Total trust. We'd have to lower every mental barrier, share every memory we've ever tried to hide, expose every fear and insecurity. No secrets, no protected spaces, just absolute openness with each other." Daniel swallowed hard. "That's intense." "It's more than intense. It's essentially ego death. You'd stop being just Daniel and I'd stop being just Zara. We'd become something new while still containing both of us. The old records call it the union of souls, but that's poetic language. What it really means is permanent psychological fusion. Would we still be ourselves? Yes and no. We'd retain our individual perspectives and personalities, but we'd also have access to each other's entire existence. Every memory, every thought, every experience the other has ever had. We'd know each other more completely than anyone has ever known anyone." Daniel tried to imagine it, having Zara's memories of traveling through space, of existing as pure consciousness, of thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, and her having his comparatively brief human life, his childhood, his failed relationships, his mundane daily existence. The disparity seemed overwhelming. "What if you see all my memories and decide I'm boring?" he asked, trying to make it a joke but failing. Zara stopped working with the holograms and gave him her full attention. "Daniel, I've been in your head for months now. I know exactly how boring you think you are, and I disagree completely. Your memories aren't about grand adventures or cosmic significance. They're about small moments of beauty, acts of quiet kindness, genuine connections with people you cared about. That's not boring. That's what makes life worth living. But compared to your experiences, my experiences are vast but cold," Zara interrupted. "I've seen wonders across the galaxy, yes, but I've experienced them alone, isolated in my consciousness, dutifully recording data. You've lived 32 years on one planet, but you've actually lived them. You've felt sunshine and tasted good food and laughed with friends and cried over losses. That's more real than anything I've experienced in thousands of years." Daniel felt the truth of her words through their connection. She genuinely meant it. She didn't see his human life as lesser. She saw it as richer in the ways that mattered. "Okay," he said. "If we're going to do this, if we're going to attempt the merge, how do we start? We share memories intentionally, not just letting me sense what you're thinking in the moment, but deliberately opening up your past to me, and I do the same for you. It will be disorienting. Human brains aren't designed to hold alien memories. It might be painful." "I trust you," Daniel said simply. So they began. Starting small at first, Zara sharing a memory of the first planet she'd ever visited as a researcher, Daniel sharing his memory of learning to ride a bike. But as the days passed and the deadline approached, they went deeper. Zara showed him what it felt like to exist without a body, pure consciousness floating through space. Daniel showed her his mother's funeral, the grief that had shaped his early 20s. With each shared memory, their connection grew stronger. Daniel started dreaming Zara's dreams, strange alien visions of colors that didn't exist on Earth and concepts that hurt to comprehend. Zara started understanding human humor, feeling the punch of a good joke in ways her logical mind never had before. On day 8, something shifted. Daniel was making breakfast when he suddenly saw his apartment from two perspectives simultaneously: his own eyes and Zara's perception of the energy patterns underlying physical matter. He gasped and dropped the spatula he'd been holding. "Zara, something's happening. I'm seeing things differently." She appeared instantly, her concern flooding their connection. "What kind of different?" "Everything has this glow, like there's light inside the molecules. And I can see paths, connections between objects. I don't know how to explain it." Zara's eyes widened. "You're seeing the substrate, the foundation layer of reality." "Daniel, that's stage 2. You're beginning the transition. Is that good? It means the merge is working. But it also means we're running out of time to decide. Once we fully transition, there's no going back. We need to be certain this is what we want. Daniel looked at her, this impossible being who'd become his entire world. Through their connection, he could feel her love for him, her fear of the unknown, her desperate hope that somehow they'd find a way to be together. And he knew his own feelings mirrored hers exactly. "I'm certain," he said. "Are you?" Zara was quiet for a long moment. "My evaluation is tomorrow. In 20 hours, my commander will scan my memories and see everything. Our time for deciding is over. Then let's not wait. Let's do the merge tonight. Complete it before they can stop us. Daniel, you need to understand what you're choosing. If we do this and succeed, we won't be fully present in physical reality anymore. We'll exist primarily in that space between, that dimension of pure consciousness. We might still be able to manifest here, but this won't be our home. We'll be something new, something that exists outside normal reality. Will we be together? Always, completely, forever. Then that's all I need to know." That night they prepared. Zara explained that the final merge required absolute synchronization, a moment where both minds opened completely at the exact same instant. It was like jumping off a cliff together, trusting the other person would jump at the same time. They sat facing each other in the center of Daniel's apartment, hands clasped, minds already intertwined. Around them, reality started to look different. The walls seemed translucent. The air shimmered with energy. Zara's glow was so bright she illuminated everything like a star. "Ready?" she asked, both out loud and in his mind. "Ready?" Daniel confirmed. "On 3. 1. Through their connection, Daniel felt Zara's love, her fear, her hope, her absolute commitment to this choice. 2. He opened his mind completely, lowering every barrier, exposing every thought and memory and fear he'd ever had. He felt Zara doing the same, her entire vast existence pouring into their connection. 3. The merge hit like a wave of light and sound and sensation all at once. Daniel felt himself expanding, his consciousness suddenly containing not just his own 32 years, but Zara's thousands of years as well. He experienced her first moments of awareness, her choice to become a researcher, her loneliness among the stars. And she experienced his human life in all its messy, beautiful detail, his first day of school, his first heartbreak, the night he met her in the forest. They were Daniel and Zara, but they were also more than that now. They were a new kind of consciousness that contained both but was greater than the sum of its parts. Daniel and Zara, Zara and Daniel. One being existing in two forms, experiencing reality from two perspectives simultaneously. The apartment around them started to fade, not disappearing exactly, but becoming less real, less solid. And beneath it, they could see the other place, the dimension the old record spoke of. It looked like space filled with light, like an ocean made of consciousness, like home. "Are you afraid?" Daniel asked with his part of their shared mind. "No," Zara answered with her part. "Are you?" "No, I'm exactly where I want to be." Hand in hand, mind in mind, they stepped forward into the light. Behind them, Daniel's apartment sat empty, the morning sun just beginning to rise through the windows. To anyone who might check on him later, it would seem like he'd simply vanished. No note, no explanation, just gone. But Daniel and Zara weren't gone. They'd just transcended. They existed now in that space between spaces, that dimension where consciousness itself was reality. They could see Earth from there, see the physical universe in all its glory. They could still visit if they chose, manifesting temporarily in physical form. But their true home was here now, in this place where their merged consciousness could exist without limitation. Time worked.